What does war sound like? What about peace? What does it sound like?
And we listen to the people outside, they are demonstrating.
Simply asking the other person, how are you? And listen to her story. This is a good step for people to feel listened to.
I invite you to listen, observe, and please empathize.
If you shout, it's because you don't feel listened. So you need to shout to the other person. So when somebody's starting to get angry, the best tool that you can do is like to start whispering. The moment you start whispering, hearts connect.
This is Dismantling the Divide, a podcast exploring the global peace movement through the voices of Nobel Peace Laureates, researchers, academics, and young people. I'm David DeRoche. This episode's called The Power of Narrative. We're at the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates in Monterrey, Mexico. It's September, and it's pretty hot outside. Our hotel in Monterrey is right in the middle of the city. We're not really in the best of neighborhoods, but there are a few decent restaurants nearby. Not far away, there's a wide promenade full of local shops selling everything from handmade leather shoes and sombreros to Chinese tchotchkes. The hotel lobby, that's the shining star.
Our gorgeous lobby, massive atrium, wood slat paneling, a lot of woodwork everywhere, very cool, colonial style architecture, amazing stained glass ceiling. Wow, that's incredible.
It's the first day of the conference, and we're gathering in the lobby. There must be, 50 or so people in there, including about 30 students and faculty from Quinnipiac, along with students from other universities too. Sean Duffy, who runs the Albert Schweitzer Institute, he's responsible for the Quinnipiac group. He arranged the whole thing. He's the reason I'm there.
You're recording? Recording mic in the face, don't worry. Half the stuff I'm not going to do this. I just figured.
Sean's tall, soft-spoken, with rosy cheeks and an ever-present smile. He's fielding all sorts of questions from students and others, while also counting heads and keeping an eye on the time. I don't want to bug him in the middle of that, so I'm looking around for people to interview. One person catches my attention, so I grab my giant fuzzy microphone and head over toward him.
And I think people right now aren't thinking about peace at all. In many parts of the world, they're thinking about the destruction of war and the destruction of politics.
Dr. Anita Revilla is, among other things, a professor at Cal State LA and chair of its Department of Chicana and Latina Studies. As soon as I see Anita, I want to talk to her. And she's tatted up, she's got this bright, beautiful, engaging smile, and she's got this magnetic energy. This is how she describes herself in a lecture to UNLV students back in 2017.
So I am a Chicana, Latina, Tejana from the south side of San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in extreme poverty. I was raised by a single mother who did not have access to higher education, and my father died when I was 8 years old. I am, like many of you, a first-generation college student and also a first-generation academic, which makes me very different than many of my colleagues. I also identify as queer, bisexual, and fluid. I don't fit or desire to fit into a heteronormative paradigm. I'm what some people call a woman of size. It means I don't match the Euro-patriarchal image of beauty, and I work actively to reject it. I'm also committed to social justice, I'm a feminist, and I'm an activist scholar. But my business card just says that I'm the chair of the Department of Interdisciplinary Gender and Ethnic Studies. Obviously, I'm much more than my business card.
Anita's wearing a sleeveless shirt, and her tattoos are decorating her arm like a human gallery. Frida Kahlo lives on her shoulder, along with something Mayan or maybe Aztec and some butterflies. But before I could ask her about her ink, people start trickling out of the hotel for the convention center, so I'm obliged to join. We're meandering like mice through the city of Monterey, following Sean, the Pied Piper. The city's bustling, horns honking, sirens blaring, and trucks belching black smoke and revving loudly as pedestrians jostle, weaving around each other in various street obstacles. The smells of diesel fumes and hot rubber linger in the humid air, accompanied by an occasional whiff of something spicy. The city of Monterey actually has some pretty incredible history. It's the second largest metro area in Mexico, and is considered a major business and industrial hub in North America. And it's also home to Mexico's National Baseball Hall of Fame. Before the Spanish settled here in the late 1500s, at least 4 different nomadic ethnic groups called this area home for about 12,000 years. Colonialism, sadly, has wiped out a lot of that history. Surrounding us are massive buildings, sculptures, street art, and monuments.
This massive sphere atop this building here. Yeah, it's pretty wild looking. Geometrical shapes, triangles all put together to make a massive sphere, and in the background there's the hills with the little colorful houses dotting the hills, and there's a statue of Benito Juarez, and almost fell down as I tried to narrate. It's a bust, I guess, or a head of Benito Juarez, and then a bridge. Sorry. I'm running into people, I'm falling down, I can't do anything. Big Corona Extra sign in the shape of a massive bottle cap. It's kind of fun looking. Did we? Okay. Oh, I see Sean. I think we're going in the right direction. I don't think it matters too much, right? I think the general vibe so far is everybody just kind of figure it out. As I almost fell down again. All right, I need to start walking, lifting my feet. That's. Let me learn to walk.
Eventually, I catch up with Renee Scott. She's a student at Quinnipiac getting her master's in social work. We're talking about how incredible it is to meet people in other countries who've done amazing work, especially when they come from countries that don't have a lot of wealth or freedom, places where saying the wrong thing could actually literally get you killed.
I think there's this mindset we have in America, like, oh, it's easy and so on and so forth. But to get the perspective of someone who lives in another country and who made such a powerful impact and don't even have the same resources or access that I have necessarily, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So I come from a journalism background, and there's a journalist here who won the Peace Prize for her work in Yemen. And the work that she was doing, she was literally facing, it was a death.
Exactly.
And so it's hard to complain from my perspective when there are people doing the same kind of work in very extreme circumstances where literally their life is at risk.
So it's like, my mindset is like, okay, well, if she could do that in Yemen,
right.
What can I do?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, seeing people experience adversity and overcome it in all kinds of fields, whether it's journalism, social work.
Correct.
In another context.
Too. Yeah. You know what I mean? Journalism, you are telling the truth and putting it on paper and telling people, look at this, And that's not an easy thing to do, because I found that in my own life, people don't like...
They don't like the truth.
Truth telling, yes. It makes people very uncomfortable. Yeah. They don't want you in the room,
That's so true. Yeah, especially if the truth, challenges their values or their personal identities.
Yep, systems and all of that, everything, yes. 100%.
Oh, that's a nice breeze.
It is. Woo. Didn't we just walk from over here?
Did we just do a big circle?
We did. I think we did.
Yeah, I think we saw the Liverpool side, didn't we?
They look like there might be.
As we're wandering in circles, looking for the entrance, the towering Sierra Madres in the distance, the loud relentlessness of urban life just hammering away, we're trusting Sean to lead the way to the event, even though he doesn't know exactly where it is. Not really anyway. He kind of knows, but he's never been there. None of us have. I mean, we aren't lost per se, but we are walking aimlessly. At least it feels that way. And sometimes that's how we are, right? As a species, just kind of aimlessly wandering, not really quite lost, but not really on track either. And I feel like this is how we are. This is how humanity is today in this moment in history. We know where we need to be, but we're kind of stuck. We're wandering in circles. Our destination's right there in front of us, but we're too caught up in whatever, ourselves, our ideologies, our smartphones. We're just too caught up in other stuff to even see where we need to go. Even though it's right there. It's right at the tip of our fingertips. It's so close. We can smell it. We can almost touch it. We can even taste it if we focus just a teeny little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I feel like no matter what I do, no matter how hard I fight for what I think is right, I inevitably feel like I'm spinning wheels in the mud. Literally and figuratively stuck. And the only people listening to me are the people who already agree with me. After wandering the streets of Monterey for like 20 minutes, someone finally figures out that the way into the event is up a massive switchback ramp that snakes its way up a few floors before leveling off in front of huge glass doors. On the ramp, I see Anita up ahead, so I catch up with her. Again, it's pretty warm and humid out, and both of us are struggling a little bit to talk. But for some reason, I keep talking and recording. Apparently, I can't take a hint. Go figure.
So tell me about your tattoos. I'm looking. These are some pretty cool tattoos you got there. I love that.
All of them have stories.
Yeah, I'm sure. Is this like an alligator at the top? What is that?
That's Quetzalcoatl, who is the serpent.
Mayan, right?
Yeah, no, it's Aztec.
Oh, okay.
It's a serpent god.
Okay.
It's on the cover of my favorite book. I'm out of breath.
I know, me too. I'm like, maybe we need to pause.
Yeah, let's wait.
Let's wait. We'll keep this up again.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going up this
incredible steep
long ramp of
the serpent god. How apropos, given we're snaking our way up the ramp toward the venue. We walked up the ramp, we finally make it to the top, and my back is drenched. I am not a pretty perspirer. Is that a thing? Anyway, we're entering the event center, which is this gigantic mall with walled windows and a massive atrium on the main floor.
Oh, I love air conditioning. Oh, wow. It's a very large, open atrium, I guess you would call it. Metal.
Very postmodern with some curves.
A lot of curves.
Some modern, some who knows what's going on.
some of that.
A sphere inside of the postmodern.
Yeah, a little bit of brutalism maybe. Mirrors on the ceiling.
So the Quetzalcoatl is on the cover of a book called Borderlands. It's Borderlands La Frontera, La Nueva Mestiza. And the author is named Gloria Anzaldúa. She's a Chicana feminist who is considered one of the foremothers of women of color feminism. She also co-edited a book called This Bridge Called My Back. And as a Southern Texas Chicana queer woman, when I read her book in undergrad over 30 years ago, she was the first book that I read that I saw myself in. And I still assign this book in class. So I decided to get the Quetzalcoatl, and underneath it says Anzalduista, which is basically like her theories and way of thinking are a guide for me.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
The others are just fun tattoos that I got with friends.
The book that inspired Anita's tattoo of the feathered serpent, Borderlands La Frontera, it's semi-autobiographical, and it combines prose and poetry in Spanish and in English. This mixing of styles and languages actually represents the book's theme. Borderlands are physical places where two cultures and identities can merge and sometimes clash. Gloria, the author, she grew up in Texas near the Mexico border, so it's personal for her. The book's subtitle is The New Mestiza. Traditionally, a mestiza is a person with both European and indigenous heritage, but the new mestiza that Gloria posits in her book is an identity that embraces all races, genders, and sexual preferences. It sounds pretty good to me, and I imagine that probably sounds good to people of faith, right? Isn't universal love the most important aspect about most religions? I mean, and didn't Jesus say in the book of Luke that, quote, when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. I mean, despite the Bible and La Frontera talking about the same things, La Frontera has actually been targeted by book-banning lawmakers.
Hello, I'm Cecilia Rodriguez Milanes from the University of Central Florida, and I am happy to contribute to the Miami-Dade College Readathon in order to celebrate and publicize some of the banned books from Tucson, Arizona. So my contribution will be from Glorian Zaldua's very important book, Borderlands Frontera. This is Chapter 5, How to Tame a Wild Tongue. I've never seen anything as strong or as stubborn, he says. And I think, how do you tame a wild tongue? Train it to be quiet. How do you bridle and saddle it? How do you make it lie down?
I can't help but think about how important this idea is, especially considering how disconnected we are from each other, how ungodly so many religious people have become. The anger at immigrants, at the LGBT plus community, the fear-mongering about China and Russia, or any foreigner for that matter. It's all about othering the other, about scapegoating, finding someone else to blame. In fact, not doing that, or doing the opposite of that, is what we should be focusing on as a species, according to Sean Duffy.
The ability to recognize in one another that very same self or that very same life force, that very same striving to be, and some of the same sort of values of living beings means that you can't really other the other, right? You can't really...
You're othering yourself at that point. And not to get all religious and biblical on you guys, but according to the book of John, Jesus said, quote, if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? And according to the book of Matthew, Jesus said, quote, truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these brothers, you did it to me. I mean, hell, even the worst book in the Bible, Leviticus, the one that all those people cite to justify their hate, even Leviticus says, quote, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself. And besides, aren't we all actually one human family? So how can a book that promotes that message, I'm talking about La Frontera, how can that book be banned? And secondly, aren't borders social constructs that never existed until one day someone decided that this flag planted here made it theirs?
And we built up empires. We stole countries. That's what you do. That's how you build an empire. We stole countries with the cunning use of flags. Yeah. You just sail around the world and stick a flag in. I claim India for Britain. And they go, you can't claim us. We live here. 500 million of us. Do you have a flag?
Oh, the great Eddie Izzard. That show, Dressed to Kill, was like 25 years ago, and it still hits. But that is the point, right? Even where the Peace Summit took place, European immigrants have only been there for about 500 years. Before that, the Chichimecas were there for at least 12,000 years. They lived in what's now northern Mexico for 120 centuries before the Spanish came. And there was a peace conference being held on land that was, for all intents and purposes, stolen just 5 centuries ago. Of course, borders aren't going anywhere, and that system is here to stay. But as a concept, as a framework for how we think about, quote-unquote, the other, borders arguably do more harm than good. You're supposed to be over there because you're different. I'm here, you're there. And that focus on difference leads to competing narratives. Each side has a story, some going back thousands of years. And if those stories clash, well, that's how you get war. Ukraine, Gaza, Lebanon, Sudan, Iran. And the Bible is a story. It's a narrative that over 1 billion people use to justify their actions, whether they're noble actions like helping the poor or cruel actions like imprisoning immigrants. All societies, cultures, people, individuals, we all have stories. And those stories almost literally define who we are. Let's get back to the summit. There's a panel discussion that's touching on this idea. One of the panelists is this pretty renowned bioethicist from Emory University, Paul Wolpe. For 17 years, Paul was the senior bioethicist for NASA. He's now establishing a center at Emory for peacebuilding and conflict transformation. He spent some time traveling the world, meeting with various peace organizations and learning about their different approaches. And one that stuck out to him was a division of Swiss peace called Dealing with the Past.
And what that division does is it looks at the narratives that groups have, and it tries to say, how do we bring these competing narratives together? How do we get two groups that are fighting to change their way of talking about each other? In a very quick example, I spent a week in Belfast. For 30 years, Belfast was one of the worst places in the world in terms of violence. It was 30 years of bombing, over 3,500 people killed, over 40,000 injured. And then the Good Friday Accords were written, and for the last 25 years, there has not been a single political killing in Northern Ireland. However, the Good Friday Accords also said that they should take down the fences, that they should take down the gates between the Catholic and the Protestant communities, and that they should create integrated schools. 25 years later, 7% of the schools are integrated. 93% of the students still either go to Catholic school or they go to Protestant school. If they go to Catholic school, they get indoctrinated into the Catholic narrative of what has happened. If they go to Protestant school, they get indoctrinated into the Protestant narrative. So the question I have is, how do we change the narrative? If we teach children the same old stories, they're going to grow up with the same old beliefs. We have to find a way to change the way people think and talk about things. We have to change people's rigid view of history. We all tell a story about history, and that story gets ossified, it gets hardened, and that becomes the truth. And if you look at Palestine and Israel, if you look at Russia and Ukraine, each side has a story that they're absolutely convinced is the real story, and they're incompatible stories. So I think a real key to trying to bring peace anywhere is, how do we change the narrative? How do we change the stories? How do we bring sides together and create a new blended narrative that allows both sides their dignity, but also allows history to change?
I spoke with Paul just before his panel, which was about how to integrate peace into educational curricula. And this for me was among my most important takeaways from the entire conference. If we want to build a peaceful tomorrow, we have to teach children early on how to talk to people they disagree with.
Oh, I think the point is we need to start with the precursors of peace education, even in kindergarten, which is, how do we talk to people? How do we communicate across ideological boundaries, which our students, and I'm a professor at a university, students have a really hard time doing that. Whether in the United States, particularly, it's about race, or it's about politics, or it's about religion, or it's about, Israel, Palestine, or Russia, Ukraine, whatever it's about. When our students are on different sides of that issue, they don't know how to approach each other and have meaningful, productive conversations, rather than conversations which deteriorate into accusations.
And it seems like our inability to do that has pushed us further and further to hang around people who are exactly like us, which makes us even more isolated and living within an echo chamber. So what is the solution? It's kind of an intractable problem, but There are solutions, right?
There are many solutions. The one we're dealing with today is, how do we give people the skills to bridge that polarization, to bridge that divide? When you are just reinforcing over and over again the same belief systems, you give people neither the incentive nor the skills to try to bridge them. And
And this is something I talked about with Jeanette Butt. She's a political science major at Quinnipiac. We chatted in Mexico, and we also sat down in the university's podcast studio when we got back home. And she was selected along with dozens of other students from around the globe to write a youth declaration. Part of what she learned writing the declaration was this idea about narratives and which stories get passed down and which ones become our history and which ones are completely overwritten, lost, or even stamped out.
It was definitely interesting to also hear about the indigenous communities and like how they're incorporated into achieving all these different goals, right? Because I also learned through the process of writing this declaration that everything is intersectional and crosses paths, right? And specifically in terms of like indigeneity, right? Like they're a marginalized community and they're honestly not talked about enough. Like, for example, if you want to bring it back here, right? Like, Quinnipiac is on, it's named after the tribe that was once here. And, I don't even know if students know that, right? And so, just to be able to, like, reaffirm those values, but also, like, learn more about Quinnipiac here and, like, being able to apply, like, indigenous rights and, what we can do, what more we can do to help communities like them and other ones as well. So.
That was one thing that kind of surprised me about the summit was I didn't hear, it's the same situation there. Like, that was a European colony, from the Portuguese and the Spanish colonized that part of the world where the Chichimecas were there for 12,000 years in that part of the world. And, for me, that's why when we did a panel, I did a land declaration saying, recognizing that. Because how can you build a peaceful tomorrow without recognizing the problems of the past?
Right.
And I think a lot of people want to forget the past or move past it, move beyond it. But I think you can only do that once you recognize it happened, right?
Absolutely.
There has to be some honesty and some reconciliation and some repairing. I think a great example of repairing is what the Nobel laureates did after that horrendous incident with the Israeli flag. That story about the Israeli flag, that's in our next episode. As a journalist and as someone who teaches journalism to college students, the power of narrative is never lost on me. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because we are storytellers. That's just our natural human tendency.
There is no human society that doesn't have stories.
Nana Yaboa is a podcaster focusing on empowering future leaders.
Whether verbal, which is the oral storytelling, or the written, we write, we tell. Even in our architecture, is the story of who we are. When we also do our artwork, however that it may be, our painting, it also tells a story of us at a specific period of time or over a time period, and our stories are ongoing.
That's a really important thing, right? Stories don't really end. They're ongoing. But we don't usually think about stories like that, do we? We like stories that have a beginning, middle, and an end. It wraps it up in a neat little package that we can always reference. And that's exactly how journalists present facts and information. They craft stories that are structured, that have an end. That's how we connect to audiences. There has to be a story. There has to be a person. There has to be conflict and an effort to solve it and some sort of resolution or cliffhanger. If journalists just provided facts without stories, not many people would care. At that point, reading a news story would be the same as reading an academic paper. And if stories didn't have an end or have a resolution, well, we'd probably feel let down or confused or even angry. But this connection to story, to narrative, it also sets us up to be manipulated. Let's say I want you to believe something you don't believe. All I need to do is come up with a better story, with a better hero, a better villain. And when I say better, what I mean is it's more aligned with your values. And voila. Now my story is the truth because my story aligns with your values better than this other story. This other story might actually be true, but I don't care, do I? Not really, not if that truth means that my values and your values are threatened, or my identity is at stake. No, for almost all of us, the truth only matters if it fits in with what we already believe. Former Oxford philosophy professor Johnny Thompson puts it like this.
Few people actually care about the truth. Few people care about facts. Instead, most people are concerned with looking good and feeling good. Most people care only about comfort, security, and power. From this observation, the philosopher Joseph Schieber coined the expression the Nietzsche thesis, where he argued that the goal of most conversations is not about seeking the truth, but about self-preservation. In other words, most people will accept or reject a fact based upon calculation rather than any concern for the truth. As Nietzsche put it, we will accept and look for truth only when it has pleasant, life-preserving consequences. Conversely, we are resistant to potentially harmful or destructive truths. We do not have any meaningful concern for the truth, but only our well-being.
Basically, if I hear a story that challenges my beliefs, well, it's a lie, plain and simple. I actually get into this a lot in my other podcast, Baffled with David DeRoche. Check it out if you get a chance. But I really struggle with this. I know we as journalists need to use stories so people will pay attention and care, because we are narrative creatures. But I also know that stories simply increase our reliance on narratives and not facts as our main source of truth. Add to that the Hollywoodification or Netflixification of everything. We're all crime solvers and researchers and investigators doing our quote-unquote own research and getting to the bottom of all the mysteries and putting together narratives that we like and ignoring all the rest. I don't have the answer. I can't tell my students to not tell a story. That would be ridiculous. But maybe there's something to that blended narrative that Paul Wolpe was talking about. Or maybe stories shouldn't have clear winners and losers, or maybe there should be at least 3 sides to a story, and not 2, which is how most news stories are structured. Or maybe every story should clearly state that there is more to the story that we don't know, and more truth could emerge someday that may change the story entirely. Isn't that how the world really is, ever-changing and evolving? What's true today may be moot tomorrow. The truth is fluid, it's complex, it's messy, and 2 or more conflicting truths can coexist at the same time. Like candy is good and bad. It tastes good, but it's bad for the body. You get the picture. So if we're talking about global peace building, the power of narratives cannot be overstated.
Put it all on the table. Let's be honest. Let's say all the things that we think, and then let's start there. And let's start from a human story. And so they both.
Bob Schlehuber runs an organization called Peace Building Connections, and he also works with a hip-hop duo called Dugri, which means straight talk in Arabic. What makes this duo unique is that one of them is Palestinian and the other is Israeli. This is how Bob explains it.
And so they both do dual narrative storytelling, where they say, hey, I'm Sama, I grew up in a village. My grandfather was a communist Palestinian leader who tried to keep people in the area. I'm Uriah. My grandfather was the general in 1967 that put the Israeli flag on the walls of the old city. What do we do with that? We're both humans. We both have stories. We both have narratives. It's not about a quote-unquote solution. It's about humanizing the conflict and then working together to go from there. I think too often people intellectualize the conflict and they don't necessarily look at it through the lens of I'm a human, you're a human. What do we do with this wild, crazy world that we're here for such a short period of time with? And then they weave music throughout the performance to, again, engage people and deepen the conversation with folks.
We're going to hear more from Bob and Dugri in the next episode, but as a musician, learning about this group, man, it really got me going. I immediately remembered being in college just before the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and how engaged in the peace movement I was. My friends and I started a band called Wellstone's Revenge. We were named after the late Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone, who was vocally against the Iraq War, but died in a mysterious plane crash shortly before Election Day. So on the evening of the 2003 State of the Union, we did a concert on top of our favorite bar, which is being turned into a Quiznos, and we called it the People's State of the Union. Music also played a huge role during the Peace Summit. In between the panels, there were performances on stage with dancers in traditional dress, doing coordinated moves with traditional music. And the styles were mostly Mesoamerican or Mexican, naturally, but they also had some Asian performances. So, it's the end of the first day. All the student attendees are gathering in the main hall for what the organizers are calling a Peace Creative Lab. The hall is massive, at least a football field wide and almost as deep. A giant stage sits in the center, flanked by an army of speakers and digital screens and all kinds of equipment and wires. Right now, there are two people on stage. One is a bearded man dressed in all black, including a black cowboy hat. The other is a curly-haired woman wearing a sequined white dress with white boots. Energetic electronic music is soon bumping in the background.
Camina a tu ritmo, por donde tú quieras. Puede ser a tu ritmo o al ritmo de la música.
The two MCs ask everyone to remove their shoes. Most people oblige. Then they ask us to start walking in a circle. The people on stage are directing. Move your body like this. Do this with your neighbor. Smile. Move your hips. Lay down. The music shifts between atonal, atmospheric sounds to happy folk music to simple beats. I gotta be honest, it seems a bit hokey, and I thought they might pull out a crystal ball and start reading our collective future.
Ahora vamos a hacer un cambio.
But then I remembered how we started the day, walking in circles, searching for the place we needed to be. There's no searching here, no real sense of being lost, at least not in the physical sense. I mean, there might have been some lost souls in there, of course, but it had me thinking. These are COVID kids. Most of them were in high school when the pandemic hit. And here they are, students from 60-some countries, literally bumping into each other in this massive group dance. And I can see the anxiety on some of their faces. Hell, it makes me feel a little uneasy. But this is the narrative that I'm putting together as I watch. Other people might have completely different stories going on in their heads as they watch. So, who's right? Are we all right? Are all of our stories correct, even if they might contradict each other?
Camino de manera normal. Mi palma se extiende.
I'm watching the young people move around, bumping into each other. Some of them are clearly uncomfortable, and others, like Jillian, a political science major at Quinnipiac, are a little confused.
Yeah, that was interesting. They told us to take off our shoes and start dancing, and I didn't know what I was getting into.
But other students are really into it, jumping and moving and shouting with their whole bodies. And then others are just going through the motions. It seems like I'm witnessing the entire spectrum of experiences, and each of them, in the process, is creating a broad spectrum of narratives, stories they'll later tell their family and friends. I caught up with the MCs afterward to talk about their event. And their English isn't that great. My Spanish is worse than their English, so the interview doesn't last that long. But from what I can gather, they simply wanted these students to connect with their senses, to feel the feeling of being alive, to be a little silly and have some fun. And maybe that's the key, being silly and having fun. You know, I sometimes wonder if we took world leaders and forced them to do something really ridiculous or silly with each other. I wonder if that would connect them on this childlike level and prime them to be fairer as negotiators. You know, being childlike rather than childish, you know. And writing your own story, while at the same time being able to merge your story with other people's stories and allow for new collective narratives to emerge. Or at the very least, recognize that someone else's story is also true, even if it contradicts your own. So I guess you could say that's our story, and I'm sticking to it, at least for now. Thanks for listening to Dismantling the Divide, which is reported, produced, edited, and hosted by me, David DeRoche. The podcast is a production of the Quinnipiac University Podcast Studio in partnership with the Albert Schweitzer Institute. To learn more about this podcast, you can go to quinnipiacpodcasts.com/dismantling the divide. To learn more about the podcast studio at Quinnipiac, go to qu.edu/podcast. You can also find us on social media at QU Podcasts. Up next, the power of art and music.
Words and language. No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
And maybe you, is that art has saved my life on a regular basis. Yes.
Art has the power to inspire you. When art focuses on love, it connects people on a deeper level and allows us to see humanity in everyone, regardless of their social background.
And was already really interested in ideas about peace and using dance as a way to bridge different cultures together.
Practice any art, music, singing, dancing, acting, drawing, painting, sculpture, poetry, fiction, essays, reportage, no matter how well or badly, not to get money and fame, but to experience becoming.
This was The Power of Narrative. Stay with us.